Johnson. She's a BA Honors, and she's Senior Academic Manager in British Council. She has joined British Council in 2011, and she has worked in various countries like Sudan, then Cambodia, and other countries, Costa Rica, Cambodia, and all. She has worked both in east and west of the western side of the world. She has been actively involved in teaching, learning, and yeah, she is associated with learners, teachers, teacher educators, and all. She has also recently worked in Sri Lanka also. Her professional interests lie in supporting teachers in learning language and improving pedagogical skills and all. Mr. Danish Abdullah is BCom BA Honors, Japanese Honors. So he is associated with British Council since 2013. He is the academic manager for schools for English and skills. He is heading skills for South India. He has got experience in large-scale teacher development projects, and he is working actively in 11 states in India. So his interests lie in training, material development for teacher capacity building, teachers' professional development, and all. So I welcome both of them once again, and I hand it over to them for conducting this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Can I just check that everyone can see this?
Yes, visible, ma'am.
Okay, great. Okay, so thank you very much for introducing us. And we hope that everyone is able to enjoy the session today and get a lot of ideas and advice for how to improve their spoken English. We're going to be concentrating on how you can improve your English. We'll have some ideas of how you can do that in the classroom as well. So we're going to have the session today is in 3 parts. And we're going to talk in the first part, we're going to talk about the things you need to understand to improve your spoken English. Okay, what do you need to understand to become more fluent and more confident? In part 2, we'll look at in the part 2 and part 3, we'll look at how you can improve how you can practice your spoken English and become more confident, and how you can the sort of things you need to notice and be aware of to do that. Okay, so the main aim today is to help you improve speaking in English. I hope you've all got pen and paper ready, because while I can't interact with you directly, I want you to think. Okay, so I'm going to ask, so Danish and I will ask you to think about some of the questions. Is everything okay? Okay, so Danish and I will ask you to think about some of the questions and maybe write some answers down. So please get involved, and we'll make a start now. Oh, at the end, we will have time for questions, and I think you know how to ask the questions through WhatsApp. Okay. So we're going to look at a few aspects of how you can, what you need to understand about English. Danish?
Thank you, Rebecca. Welcome everybody to the session, and good morning. So first of all, we will look at whether English that we use, it changes from one situation to another, or it remains the same. Yeah. So here we have got 3 photos. Becky, what do you think is the first photo here?
Okay, so I think we've got 3 photos of different situations, right? So if we take the top photo, to me, that looks like 4 friends chatting.
Great, you've got it right. The next one, I think, is from a classroom. Am I right there?
Yeah, I think so. So that's a teacher with lots of pupils in the classroom.
Yes, so it's a young learner's classroom. And the last one is a woman talking over the phone. Who do you think she's talking to?
I don't know, she could be talking to a friend, but I think the setup looks a bit more like in an office, so maybe she's at work.
Yes, that's right. She's at work. So everybody, please think about these 3 photographs, and we have 2 questions there. Think about where they are. We have partly discussed this. And think more importantly about the second question. Do you think English they're using is the same, or do you think it changes from one situation to another? You have 20 seconds to think. Make some notes on your papers, starting now. I think that would be 20 seconds. Okay, yeah. Great. So Becky, great. Yeah, Becky, if you look at the first photograph, friends talking, what kind of English, what kind of language would you expect to hear there?
So I suppose when you're talking with friends in your first language or any language you're fluent in, I think you end up speaking very fast. Sometimes 2 people speak at the same time. When you're talking with friends, you often have the same context and background, and so there might be a lot of jokes that other people wouldn't understand, perhaps. And you're probably speaking much faster than in other situations.
Yes, I agree there. And I think you will also have a lot of short sentences, leaving your sentences incomplete because, you know, the other person understands what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But can we expect the same kind of language in a classroom?
So I think that's going to be very different. The teacher in a classroom has a very different relationship with the students. So I expect in the classroom we'll have lots more instructions, imperatives, orders, do this, don't do this. I think there will be perhaps less two-way conversation. There should be, you know, students talking to the teacher, but perhaps there might be less of that than in a conversation between friends.
Yes, I agree there. And when somebody's talking to their customers, for example, what kind of language would we expect there?
So I suppose that will be different again, won't that? Because you will probably you want to convey a professional but friendly tone to make a positive image for the company. You might be talking, you know, a little bit more carefully, choosing your words a little bit more. So it's probably more about the tone as well. I wouldn't say it's formal English, but it's, you know, it's a more, it's a different tone compared to the tone you'd use with your friends or in a classroom.
Yes, it'll be more professional than casual, isn't it?
That's true, yeah.
Great. So here we can clearly see that language that we use, English that we use, changes depending on the situation and people we are with. So now let's move on. Becky, will you please take us to the next one?
Yeah. Okay, so we've seen that English can be different in different situations, but I suppose we already know that, don't we? So on your piece of paper, just answer the question, yes or no. Is written English the same as spoken English? So I hope you've all written no. I hope you all realize that written English is very different to spoken English. For example, if I show you this, you don't need to read it, but you can see, I hope, that it's an email. This is an email which is perhaps a professional email, and I don't imagine anyone speaks like this. Do you ever hear someone say, "Dear Miss Summers, I hope this finds you in good health. You expressed an interest in learning about assessing language as an English teacher." This isn't how we speak. Okay, so we know written English is different to spoken English. So that's an important context to be aware. So let's think about how written and spoken English are different. Danish?
Okay, so now we'll look at some features of language in general. The features are on your right-hand side. There are 5. Look at each one of them and think about which one do you think matches with spoken English and which one do you think is more related to written English. Okay, so ready with your pens and paper? Okay, so let's look at the first one. A person uses more specific language. Is it written or spoken English? Becky, what do you think?
So I think when you're talking about specific language, you're probably talking about choosing the correct word at the correct time. And that's very difficult to do in spoken English when you're having a fluent conversation. Often when you're talking, you need to go, yeah, I meant that person, or I meant this thing. It's very difficult to be specific sometimes. So I think in written English, you can use much more specific language. Shall we see if I'm right?
Let's see.
Yeah.
Ooh,
What about you, Danish? What about you, Danish? Which one? What about when you frequently makes corrections and changes?
When I'm writing an email, I sometimes have to make a lot of corrections. I delete things and then I write them again, but not before sending it. Yeah. But I think when I'm talking to people, even if it's in a professional setup, I think I have to make a lot of corrections and sometimes change what I was saying, change my words, repeat them with different words so the other person understands it better. So I think it's spoken English, isn't it?
I think so too. Like you say, you can make corrections when you're writing email, but when you've sent it, that's it. You can't really make changes anymore. So I think you're right. Let's see. Oh, went backwards. Okay. Okay, the next one is an interesting one. Using discourse markers. What's a discourse marker, Danish?
So a discourse marker is basically the words that we use to change topic or to come back to the topic that we were originally talking about. Becky, I think we have discourse markers in written English as well, but these ones anyway write well. Do you think they are more written or spoken?
So I suppose these ones are probably more spoken, right? Who might say, anyway, I'll see you later. And often writing, yeah, and like write and well, they're very good to like when you're gathering your thoughts. Yeah. So well, yeah, well, it happened like this.
Yeah, especially when you're taking time.
That's right, yeah. And you were saying that discourse markers are used in written English too. Yeah, I think you're quite right, and it's the examples here which tell us that this one goes in spoken English. In written English, you'll probably use things like however, moreover, nonetheless, but these are much more, you wouldn't say those very often.
That's right. And when do you use longer sentences? When you're speaking or you're writing? You might be using, you might be using longer sentences when speaking when you're a politician.
Yes, I think that's a very good example. But for the general person, on average, is that true, do you think?
I keep my sentences fairly short.
Yeah, I think, when you're having longer sentences, that implies planning time. When we're speaking, we don't have much time to plan what we're saying, particularly in conversations. So I think, that's probably a sign of written English.
Let's check your answer. Right, well done. Okay, so would you like to take the last one here?
Okay, uses more verbs. So that one's probably a bit more tricky. I'm not too sure if everyone is sure about that one, but it's actually true that in spoken English, we use many more verbs than in written English because our sentences are shorter and we have more sentences perhaps than in a piece of written text. And so our spoken English is much more about doing things and about what happened. Whereas in written English, we can use longer phrases to set the scene and describe more, use more adjectives and nouns. So I'm going to say that's more spoken English.
Oh, let's check it. Well done.
Okay.
So here, yeah, so here we have got 3 key features of spoken English. I think we'll look at some of the strategies for speaking English in the next slide with you, Becky.
That's right. Okay. So I want everyone to think about when they're speaking in their first language. When you're speaking in Tamil or whatever your first language is everything you say always fluent and 100% correct? If you're like me and like most of the people in the world, that's not true. Okay. I think we already mentioned, that we already saw that when we speak, we often make corrections and changes. That's natural. Okay. We have a new thought and we want to change what we were going to say. So it is important for us to remember when we're speaking a second language or a third or fourth, that we're not expected to be 100% correct every time we speak. Okay. It's natural to correct ourselves and make changes. So there are some strategies that we should think about when we're speaking. Okay. So in social contexts or professional situations, here are some things that will help you to become a little bit more fluent. Okay. So the first thing is being familiar with the situation. Okay. If I walk into a university physics lecture where they're talking about quantum mechanics or something like that, a deep science topic, I'm not going to understand half of the lecture. It's not because of my language, it's because I don't understand the situation. I don't understand what they're talking about. So this piece of information is really useful. If we know, or we can know what to expect in a situation, we can be more prepared and we can better understand what we hear. So if you know you're going to teach a lesson on a particular topic, then you can research the vocabulary and be more confident with it. If you know you and your friends are going to watch a film in English about, which is science fiction or something, if you read about the film and then if you can read about what the film is about, you can be more familiar with the context and you will understand more. Okay. When you're having conversations with people, you should be always asking questions. Danish, why is it useful to ask questions when you're having a conversation with someone?
I think it particularly helps me in clarifying my understanding. And, I think half our communication really depends on understanding what the other one is saying. Only then we'll be able to really respond to what they're saying. But I think it's also a trick. So, when I need some thinking time, even if I understand what they're saying, I can still ask a question and get myself some thinking time. What do you think?
That's a great strategy. That's a really good strategy. Yeah, I think that's really important. And like you say, for clarifying information and just checking you understand exactly, it's a really important technique and being able to ask questions. Okay.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think sometimes we feel a little hesitant in asking questions. So I think we need to overcome that. Whenever we need a bit of clarity, I think it's a very good idea to ask a question instead of feeling lost.
I think that's so true. I think, if we all have more confidence to ask questions, we'd be able to improve our own learning and understanding much better, become more fluent more quickly. Okay, this next one's an interesting one. Rephrasing. What does that mean, Danish?
I think it relates to what we were talking about earlier, changing and corrections when we speak, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think, we can use it when we say something and it's perhaps not very clear. We can go back, change it, rephrase it. It's also perhaps useful, like you were saying with the questions part, if someone says something and you think you understand, but you're not 100% certain, you can rephrase it as a question, and they can say, yes, that's right, or no, I meant something else. So I think that's another good tip or strategy to bear in mind. And if you become comfortable with rephrasing things and asking them as questions, you can clarify what you said or clarify what someone else has said. Okay, paraphrasing. What does that mean?
I have no clue.
That's not true. So paraphrasing, so when we talk about paraphrasing, it's a big word, but what it really means is sometimes when I speak, I don't know the word for something. That piece of vocabulary has suddenly vanished from my mind. What do you do in that situation, Danish?
I try to explain it using some other words, and it happens with me a lot when I try to speak Tamil.
Yeah, it happens to me all the time in English.
So I will get.
Yeah. So, for example, if you can't remember the exact word for library, you can say, "Oh, I was in that place where you can borrow books." Okay. So people, "Oh, you mean the library?" "Yes, I meant the library." So it becomes, you don't have. So don't just go, "I was in the oh," and stop speaking. Okay. To keep the conversation going, you can talk around it, describe something, use other ways of getting your meaning across. This one we've already mentioned, and it's the most important. Don't worry about mistakes. If you worry about every mistake or every possible mistake, you won't say anything. The people who become the most fluent the most quickly are the people who don't worry about their mistakes too much. Okay. Obviously, it's important for you to recognize where you can improve, listen to your own English, and think about how you can change it to become more accurate, but don't let mistakes stop you from speaking. Okay. Because you probably will speak most English a lot of English in the classroom, a couple of more things that you can be aware of. In the classroom, you'll probably have a lot of instructions. You'll probably have things, so the instructions you will give in a lesson. When you're planning your lesson, make sure you write down the instructions. So I did scripts, so write down the instructions, and then you can practice saying them, and you will know what you want to say and say them confidently in the classroom. The same with stories. If you're going to tell a story, practice saying the story, telling the story. So when you actually tell your students the story, it's fluent and confident, and they will enjoy it much, much more. Okay, so Danish is going to introduce another key aspect of understanding speaking.
Yeah, sure. Before we move to the next one, can we have a little second there? Yes. So if you remember on this slide, when Becky asked me what paraphrasing means, do you remember what my response was? Said, I have no clue. So sometimes there might be situations when I don't know, and there's no harm in saying I don't know. So when I said I don't know, Becky helped me. Yeah, so always remember, if you don't know, feel free to say it. I don't know. Let's move on to the next one.
Good tip. Because when you're speaking with someone, they want to help you. No one wants to not understand you. That's really important. That's a good tip. Thanks. Okay.
Okay, so next we are going to look at, I think, one of the most important, if not the most important element of speaking, and it is pronunciation. So when people in general hear this word, pronunciation, the first thought that occurs to our mind is usually the accent or the sounds of individual words. But there's a lot more to pronunciation than just that. So we are going to look at a few of them here. So first we are looking at connected speech. Connected speech, Becky, what would that mean?
Okay, so that's a good question. If I speak, is this natural English? So yesterday I went to the shop and I bought nothing because I just remembered the shops are all closed. Is that normal?
That might be natural for a machine.
So what's the difference between how a machine speaks and how we speak?
I think what we do is we bring words together, isn't it? So we merge them together. Sometimes a word is, they're not separate. They become together and two words make one. When they sound, it's like one word.
That's
So
true.
this is called connected speech, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Okay.
like, it's not like you get a dictionary to speak. If you said every word like it's pronounced as it's written in the dictionary, you'll end up sounding very strange.
Absolutely. So 3 different elements of a connected speech that we'll look at in a bit while watching a video, I hope.
Yeah.
So the first one is schwa, which is a sound. And it's a weak sound. It's not stressed sound. And I think it's one of the most common sounds in English, especially while you're speaking.
I like to tell people, I like to tell people that English is a very lazy language. We have this very lazy sound, like lazy teenagers going around. So teacher, Rebecca, it's a very common lazy sound.
Absolutely. Okay, and we also need to think about how a word ending with a consonant sound links with a word starting with a vowel sound. So can you give an example here, Becky?
So a simple example, when we learn the alphabet, we often say an apple, okay? Do we say an apple when we're speaking fluently? It's very difficult to put a space between the two words. We would often say an apple, and the N joins with the A of apple.
Absolutely does. And similarly, when a word ends at vowel and the next one starts with vowel, we join them too. The next important element of speaking is intonation. Intonation basically means the rise and fall in our tone. So when we speak, we don't speak at the same pitch. Sometimes it goes higher, sometimes it comes down. That's called intonation. And rhythm is the music that our speech produces. So how we can create this natural effect when we speak? For that, we need to consider 3 different elements. First is the stress that we give to individual words. Second one is?
The stress that we give in sentences. So if I really want, we say things are really important and we stress particular words in a sentence.
Absolutely. And as we have already spoken about rising and falling tones. So are we going to watch a quick video here, or should we?
Yeah, so let's watch a quick video. I'm hoping this will work so everyone can see. We're going to watch a quick video about just an introduction to some connected speech. Okay, this is just a short video and it's on YouTube, and we'll provide you with the links to these resources later.
English lessons. Today's mini English lesson is on solving the mystery of why it is so difficult to understand English speakers when they're speaking. Connected speech. Connected speech basically means that when words are pronounced together, they affect each other and they're pronounced a little bit differently than if they were just by themselves. Today, we're going to look at disappearing sounds. If you look at the sentence, I can't speak Italian, it's very clear that I'm saying the negative can't. But listen to me say it. I can't speak Italian. The t sound disappears. Now, why is this? The reason the t sound disappears is because when the t sound occurs between other consonant sounds, it's actually very difficult to pronounce. So, English speakers, just get rid of it. Listen, I've done it again. We just get rid of it. Just t disappears. Another sound is the d sound. Listen to me say the word friend. It clearly ends with a d sound. But if I put it in a sentence, my friend gave me this awesome present yesterday, the d disappears. Or hold this carefully, it's fragile. It sounds like I'm saying hold, not hold. So, next time you're listening to an English speaker speak, maybe listen out for the sounds that they're not making. and that might help decipher what it is they are saying. I hope it helps. Bye.
Okay, so I hope everyone was able to see and hear that video. It was just a short one. There are lots more videos that the BBC, the British Council has on different aspects of pronunciation, and like I said, we will share some links with those later on. But I hope it gave you a bit more of an idea of different aspect, one particular aspect of connected speech. Okay, so so we've talked about the things that we need to know. We need to know how to. We need to know about pronunciation. We need to know some strategies to become more fluent. So let's go into a bit more detail. How can we improve our understanding of what happens in spoken English? Okay. So I want you to think, when do you speak to English? What kind of English do you listen to? So on the screen, I've got lots of different places you could find English. Be honest, do you listen to English anywhere other than in meetings or with your colleagues? Do you go out and find real English to listen to? Do you watch films? Do you listen to music? Do you listen to the news on the BBC or on other authentic English channels, whether it's ABC Australian broadcasting or American news? Do you watch videos on YouTube in English? Do you watch presentations through the TED series? Do you ever use the British Council resources? Where there must be lots more places you can find English as well. Danish, what kind of English do you listen to? What kind of things do you listen to in English?
I think because I spend most part of my day in the office, so that's the real English that I get to listen to the most. But apart from that, I also watch movies. I particularly like thrillers, so I watch a lot of Hollywood movies. And I listen to news a lot, and we have a lot of local news channels in India. Mm-hmm. For example, we have CNBC that I listen to quite often. Yeah.
Okay, so that's probably.
What about you,
well, yeah, like you, I suppose, like most people, most of my English interaction happens, and most of my interaction happens at work. Although perhaps these days less so. But yeah, for me, YouTube is my kind of my addiction, maybe. So I watch a lot of YouTube, but I'm also learning Spanish, and so I try and watch videos I like in Spanish on YouTube. Watching a film is a bit more advanced for me at the moment, so I try and watch short news clips from a Spanish station and so on. There are some songs I like, so I sometimes find the lyrics and sing along in Spanish to the songs.
Sometimes when I watch videos on YouTube, I sometimes struggle to understand what the speaker is saying. Is there a way to find some help there?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah. So what you can do is you can click on the CC icon. So it's for closed captions. And that's a really good point, because then you can see what they're saying at the same time. Sometimes people they create the captions so that they are accurate, and they're the best ones. But most videos will have automatically generated captions, which sometimes aren't exactly perfect, but they can help you understand, because the computer is creating the captions, but they can help you get an idea of what is being said as well. And that's a really good point. Same with a lot of TED Talks as well. They often have the transcript or the captions.
Subtitles at the bottom of the video.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Subtitles.
That's a useful term.
I want to share one thing. I mean, it might be a bit depressing these days, but one thing I like to do is listen to the news. And I think, you know, one really good thing is that the BBC has 1 minute news that they update regularly. Now, it might be a bit fast, but it's just 1 minute and you can watch it once or twice, you know, a few times to understand better. And it's important sometimes to listen more than once. So I want to see if we can watch the current news. If we can watch this and see if we can, so I go to this website, 1 Minute World News, it's the BBC website. And we can see what's happening in the world today. I don't want to depress anyone. I think we all know what's happening. So this is only 1 minute. They normally have 3 stories. I want everyone to listen. What are the 3 main stories? When I remember earlier, one of the strategies was being familiar with the context. Danish, how do you think being familiar with the context will help us listen to the news right now?
The COVID-19.
So the whole world has shared knowledge. So I think we can predict quite easily what most of the main stories are going to be about. We might already have some of the key language. But even in normal times, you know, if you think about what's happening in the world, if you try and predict the story, what the main headlines, and if you do it every day, then you will hear a lot of the same headlines come up as they go through the news process, and you'll become more familiar with the vocabulary. So right now, just listen. What are the 3 main stories?
Latest headlines for you from BBC News. The UK has now officially recorded more deaths related to COVID-19 than any other country in Europe. It's overtaken Italy's total of more than 29,000. The death rate related to the virus in care homes in England and Wales is still rising, now near 6,000. Only the United States has lost more lives to the pandemic. One of the British government's senior scientific advisors has resigned. He's admitted breaking social distancing rules that he helped set up. Professor Neil Ferguson's advice to the Prime Minister led to implementing a lockdown in the UK. He said he made an error of judgment. President Trump has confirmed he plans to wind down the virus task force within weeks, even though the American death toll has now passed 70,000, and a draft government report suggests it could reach 3,000 a day next month. He's admitted lifting lockdown restrictions will mean more deaths.
Okay, I hope I didn't make everyone too sad and too depressed, but this is a really good site where you can hear the main headlines. Today it was quite UK focused. Often it's very international. So we had 2 UK stories and 1 about America. So it's a good way, if you just do this, you know, watch it a couple of times, just take it 5 minutes to think carefully about what you hear. It's a great way to kind of hear different English and get more used to it. But the most important thing is to listen widely, listen to different types of English. The English you hear in songs will be different to the English you hear in scripted films or TV programs. The way people speak in a presentation in a TED talk will be different to the way they talk on the news. And if you listen to the radio, BBC Radio 4 or other radio stations, when they have conversations, again, that will give you more examples of how people speak in everyday situations. Okay. Do you want to add any other examples or ideas here, Danish? You mentioned a local radio station.
Yes, I think there are both radio stations as well as a news channel that we can watch in English. And I think before we move, it will be a real good idea for teachers to make a note of useful tips that they're collecting from this particular slide.
Yeah,
I think particularly that 1 minute news, because I think one main complaint that we have from news is it's usually very long and nobody has the time for that. So 1 minute.
Exactly. Yeah, 1 minute news is a really good thing, I think. And maybe it's too fast when you first hear it, but if you listen to it several times, it still only takes you 5 or 6 minutes to listen to it 5 or 6 times, and you'll hear much more more you listen to it. Okay, great. So I hope people have taken down a few ideas. So now we're going to move to, okay, so the first tip is listen widely, listen to lots of different types of English. The next thing, and you can't just become a fluent speaker of English like that. You have to work at it. One thing you need to work on is noticing aspects of pronunciation. So earlier we talked about connected speech, and in the video she talked about noticing disappearing sounds, when the t disappears or the d disappears. So if you can see that or hear that, then you can use that in your own language and sound much more natural and fluent. So you've been listening to us for a long time. Now I want you to work a little bit. In a minute, I'm going to say a short phrase, okay? And I'll want you to write the sentence down. Now, I'm going to take a sentence from one of the British Council podcasts. The British Council podcasts are a really useful way to listen to English because they have interesting topics, but they also have the script, so you can listen first and then listen and read, and you can check vocabulary and pronunciation. So this sentence is from a podcast, and I want you to write the sentence down and then count how many words I say, okay? Are you ready? You have pen and paper? Okay. In each episode, we'll give a short talk on a theme. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Once more, I want you to write on your paper the sentence and then count how many words you hear. Okay, ready? In each episode, we'll give a short talk on a theme. Okay, I'm going to trust that you've all written something down. I hope you're not just thinking it in your head, you've actually written it down. So did you write this on your paper? In each episode, we'll give a short talk on a theme. Now, I counted that earlier, and that was 11 words. 11 spoken words. We'll count wheel as one word. Okay. This time, I'm going to say it again. And I want you to see if you can decide which words I'm stressing, which words have the main stress, okay? In each episode, we'll give a short talk on a theme. Okay? In each episode, we'll give a short talk on a theme. Which words do you think were stressed? I hope, and just underline them. And do they match with this? Okay. So in each episode, we'll give a short talk on a theme. And I hope you can notice that the words which we stressed are the words which have the most information. They're like the nouns and the content words. Okay. The other words are important. They give us the grammatical link. We know we're talking about the time period, who's talking, and so on. But the real information, most important information, is in each episode, short talk, theme. Okay, the last little thing I want you to do is I'm going to say it again. This time, I want you to think about where do the words link? Okay, are any of the words connected? Okay, so in each episode, we'll give a short talk on a theme. In each episode, we'll give a short talk on a theme. Could you see any words linked? Okay, so two main ones. You can say this in different ways, but how I was saying it, you'll probably hear in each episode, we'll give a short talk on a theme. So we have in each episode, we'll give a short talk on a theme. And you can see how some words are connected, some words are stressed. Okay, so what I recommend is you can listen to just a short sentence, the first sentence of something from that news reader or from the British Council podcast, where you then can check the transcript. See if you can write down the first sentence or the first short phrase, count how many words, see which ones have the main stress, see where words link. Okay, so this will improve your listening skills, but it will also improve your spoken skills because you'll become a more natural speaker of English. Danish, is there anything you want to add on pronunciation and noticing?
I think particularly when we're starting to learn a language and trying to speak it, I think we really need a lot of confidence. Sometimes it's mainly the lack of confidence that prevents us from speaking fluently. I think these kind of little tips can give us a lot of that confidence that we need to get started with. So I think it will be a very good, useful exercise to kind of notice and then try to replicate it when you speak. So to start with, what you can do is you can create a safe circle with your friends, for example, and then practice this with them.
I think that's really important, to build up a safe circle, friends you trust, where you feel comfortable practicing and giving feedback to others and getting feedback for yourself, and then you can work on it together. That's a really good idea. Okay, so I'll let Danish talk about the next piece of resource we've got. It's more for the classroom.
Sure. Thanks, Becky. So just a minute ago, we were talking about building this confidence in speaking English. I think when we talk from the perspective of teachers, a lot of that confidence can come from your classroom. I think a lot of us do not use English in a classroom because we don't feel confident. So here we have got a few little tips to help you get started using more English in your classroom. Becky, do you think we have a quick minute to play one of those videos here?
Yeah, I think we'll play one of these videos here. So, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us back to, now I don't know if anyone watching is familiar with this site. This is the British Council Learn English Kids site. Okay, so we've got lots of resources here. I'm going to show you, going to play one video, just a couple of minutes long. What I should say is that these every activity on this site has preparation, so you do a task beforehand. It has the words, the scripts, the activities. Often it has a game, something to do after the activity. But right now we're just going to listen to the video. So this is a video you could use for yourself, for your own children, or in your classroom. And I'm going to play the video, and I hope that everyone joins in, okay?
Words have rhythms. We can use our sticks and drums to tap out the rhythms of the words. Let's tap out the rhythms of a really delicious meal. What should we start with? How about chicken, rice and peas? Chicken, rice and peas. 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 Hands up, who likes chicken, rice and peas? Yummy, yummy, yummy. Put it in my tummy. I like, you like chicken, rice and peas. Chicken, rice and peas. Chicken, rice and peas. Hands up, who likes chicken, rice and peas? Yummy, yummy, yummy. Put it in my tummy. I like, you like chicken, rice and peas. Chicken, rice and peas. Chicken, rice and peas. Hands up, who likes chicken, rice and peas? Yummy, yummy, yummy. Put it in my tummy. I like, you like chicken, rice and peas. I'm so thirsty. What should we have to drink? How about black currant juice? Black currant juice. 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 Hands up, who likes black currant juice? Yummy, yummy, yummy. Put it in my tummy. I like, you like black currant juice. Black currant juice. Black currant juice. Hands up, who likes black currant juice? Yummy, yummy, yummy. Put it in my tummy. I like, you like black currant juice. Black currant juice. Black currant juice. Hands up, who likes black currant juice? Yummy, yummy, yummy. Put yummy. I like you like currant juice. Want any pud? Ooh, pudding. How about chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake. Hands up, who likes chocolate cake? Yummy, yummy, yummy. Put it in my tummy. I like you like chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake. Hands up, who likes chocolate cake? Yummy, yummy, yummy. Put it in my tummy. I like you like chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake. Hands up, who likes chocolate cake? Yummy, yummy, yummy. Put it in my tummy. I like you like chocolate cake. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Put it in my tummy. I like you like chocolate cake. We love chocolate cake.
Okay, that's my favorite song because chocolate cake is one of my favorite things.
Sorry, my mouth is watering. So I think what's really useful about these kind of activities is that you can use it in your classroom. It's the stage where you, as a teacher, need to build your confidence, and you can do that with your class. So you can play these kind of videos and sing along with your learners. So it won't only help you make your classes more interesting, but will also give you a lot of opportunities to focus specifically on element of speaking English, for example, intonation or rhythm or stresses. Yeah. So you can use kind of activities with your classes, and it will help you in both the ways. Anything you would like to add, Becky?
I think exactly that. And songs in particular are really good for practicing the rhythm of English. This song in particular was really focusing on stress, like chicken, rice and peas, chicken, rice and peas. It was really focusing on how we stress particular aspects of sentences. So exactly. Okay. There are many other resources on this website. So here's like a poem you could listen to. There are many other things. So we encourage you to go and check it out, whether it's for you and your family, or for your classroom.
Yes, something I would like to highlight here is at the end of this webinar, we'll share a link of all these resources plus some more that you can access on your own. And these are all free to access resources.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so our final part is thinking about, we've just been thinking about how we can become more aware of features of spoken English. Now we're going to think about how we can actually practice English. What can we actually do? Okay, Danish. Do you want to go through a slide, Danish?
Yes, sure. So the first tip that we've got here, and I think we are repeating it a few times, so you really notice the importance of this. So find opportunities to listen to authentic, real-life English, English that you can listen to using various resources we've already discussed. You can also find opportunities in your local context where you can get to listen to authentic English. Something I would like to highlight in scenarios where you listen to authentic English is you can always focus and find chunks of language, pieces of language that you can use in your real life. So I'll give you an example from my own life. Many years ago when I was young, when I was a little kid, I was watching this movie. And in the movie, the actor opens the door for the actress as she walks in. And the actress thanks him. She says, "Thank you." My natural response to it would have been at that age, "You're welcome." Yeah. But the actor replied, "It's my pleasure." It's like, wow, that's new. I can use it. And I used it the next day in my class. And the person I used it with was sort of really happy to listen to this new expression. So I think it's very important to also find where you can use language in your own real life scenarios.
I think that's that's a really good tip. And that's the point of listening to lots of different sources of English, and like you you pick up things and you can see different ways of saying things, because often we get taught one way of saying something, and although that's correct and fine, there are many ways of saying things. So this is really good.
Okay, I think we've already discussed this quite in detail about pronunciation, how we connect words, how we push them together so two words sound like one. And we have already spoken about the stress, etc. Becky gave you this tip earlier: listen, count the number of words, and then try to repeat it with stress, with connecting them together. The third one is, I think, a little new here. Notice sound which don't match spellings. What does this mean, Becky?
I think one of the biggest complaints people learning English have is that the way we say a word doesn't match the way it's spelt. So that's one part of this. This means that, you know, you can't always tell how a word is said by looking at it. You have to check how people actually say it. But it's also the case that, like we said earlier, even when you can say friend, that's fine. But when in a normal sentence, you probably just say friend. My friend said this. You don't say that. So noticing the sounds which are missing or different to how they spell.
This reminds me of something interesting I read somewhere a while ago. I think I was reading an article, and the article said if somebody is mispronouncing a word in English, it's most probably because they learned it by reading.
That's really true, because I used to read lots of books as a kid, and you know, when you're a child, you're still increasing your vocabulary, and I was probably reading books at a higher level than I had vocabulary, and so I know there were a couple of words in English which I was saying wrong because, well, when I hardly ever said them, but when I did say them, I said them wrong because I'd only seen them written down, and I didn't know how they were meant to sound. So it's so true. You do need to check how something is actually said.
Great. Shall we move on then?
Yeah.
Now, so far we were really focused on noticing language, registering it while listening. All of this is useful when we put it into practice. And one very useful way to do this is by recording yourself. So I'm not quite sure, Becky, because I've never heard that 1 minute BBC News. Do they also have the transcript? Do they have?
No, they don't have a transcript for that, as far as I'm aware. So that's something which is missing. But you can read them. You know, they will have written articles on the same topics. So that reading those beforehand or afterwards will help you think about the vocabulary they are likely to use.
Sure. And there are many different news channels which have the script as well available on their websites. So one way to improve your spoken English is to first listen. You can decide, even if it's a 30 minutes news broadcast, you can listen to only 1 minute of it. So focus on that 1 minute, listen to it once or 2 times, then record yourself saying the same thing using that script available on the website. Then go back to the video and listen to it again, focusing on any areas that you would like to particularly improve. It could be your connected speech, or it could be your stresses. So that's one very useful way to improve your spoken English.
Yeah, exactly. And one other thing which has the transcript is the other podcasts that the British Council produce. So it's an app you can download, and it has the transcript, you know, what the actual words they're saying. So okay, so these are some things that you can do on your own. Okay, let's think about what you can do with a friend. So Danish said earlier it's really important to have like a safe circle with 1 or 2 friends. So think about the things that you can. How can you improve your spoken English when you're talking with a friend? Okay, so you need trust between you, but then there are different things you can do. So if we think about what tools you have, okay, so at the moment you probably can't see your friend, but you're still communicating with them, right? You've got WhatsApp, you've got other social media or apps to connect with them. So how can you use those effectively to practice spoken English? We'll just go through these briefly. I'm sure you are teachers. You can think of many ways you can do this. And my main point here is, as a teacher, we have lots of ideas for our classrooms, but they're also good ideas for us when we're trying to improve our language skills as well. So simple things that you might want to do is, for example, you and your friend or colleague, if your friend is a teacher as well, pick an activity that you both do, and then you can plan the instructions on your own, record the instructions on WhatsApp, send them, and then you listen to each other's and see if you've given the same instructions or different, and you can analyze them together. Okay. Have a bit of fun with your friend. Send a strange or random photo and start a conversation. Again, you can use the recording function on WhatsApp. Just send a photo with no context and say, I found these two photographs in the house the other day. And then your friend can come back with something. Who are they? And that kind of thing. So you can build up a conversation together. Final idea, just have a real conversation, have a focus, talk about something that you've done recently. I suppose at the moment, none of us are doing anything particularly exciting, but that's fine. Talking about everyday things around the house, what your child has done, what they're doing, a recent lesson you've given. This is all good practice. So you can these are just some ideas. There are lots of different ways you could practice with a friend, whether you actually call them or you send short recordings back and forth on your social media app. I think this is something that we won't go into this in too much detail, but these are just some ideas. What could you do with if you have a group of colleagues, Danish?
Great. So right now we were talking about working with your friends in smaller circles. Now, a very good idea to gain more confidence, I would think it would be really useful to create a large group for practicing your English on a regular basis. So if you use Zoom, that's an online video conferencing app. Otherwise, you can also use WhatsApp for a group call. Mm-hmm. I'm not quite sure what's the number that they allow, but they allow group call now. So you can decide on a time. And I think it's very important to decide on a time and create this sort of a routine, not to do it on a random basis that you do it today and the next time you do it is after 2 months. That will not help. So agree a time and do it regularly. So for such sessions, we have got a few tips here that we'll have a quick look through. The first one here is show and tell meeting. Show and tell meeting. What do you think this might be?
So I think this is something where, people come prepared to talk about an interest or a hobby they have, and they can show things related to it. So, for example, if you do a lot of knitting or sewing, you can show it and say, this is something I did recently. I really enjoy knitting because this reason or whatever. So you talk about an interest or hobby you have. And I think the key thing is you need to have time to prepare for that. And you can have one person in one meeting do that. Then people can ask questions about what you're talking about.
And a little twist that you can use using the same sort of resources and techniques. So what you can do is send some photos to your friends and ask them to guess what the photos are about. And when you have this meeting, you ask them to take turns and tell them what they think the photos are about. So they give you a sort of a short story, and then you tell them which one is the closest or which one is the most interesting. And then you share your story behind those photographs. That can be another little thing you can do.
That's a really good idea. I like that. I'll use that. Okay. Okay, what's the just a minute game?
So I think there are different variations to just a minute game. My particular favorite is, so what I do is I ask, I used to use it in my classroom quite regularly. So I would ask students to write a topic on a slip of paper. I collect them and fold them and put them in a, let's say, a hat. Students take turns, pick one random, and they speak about it for a minute. If they're able to speak about the topic without repetition for a minute, they won a point for the team. If they're not able to, they lose. So how can we use it online with our friends, Becky?
Okay, so I think you can keep the same rules. If you have the topics prepared beforehand, you could have two teams in the same way. You could have, like, say you and I would be on one team and two other people on another team, and you could start on the topic, and I think you can do it in the same, more or less in the same way. I think that's the beauty of online meetings and teaching at the moment. It's very easy to adapt our classroom activities for online environments. Are there any ideas you have for adapting?
I think that's mainly it. What we can also do is, so for example, if I'm not able to speak for more than 20 seconds or 30 seconds, the next person starts and continue from there on. If they're able to speak for a minute, they get the point and I lose it.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah.
And I think this choosing random topics will be really, really helpful in building your confidence, because when you don't have a lot of time to prepare, you need strategies and ideas on building conversation without really having a lot of prep time.
That's good, yeah.
With your close circle, you will have more confidence. And this confidence will help you when you step out in the real world.
For sure. Okay. Debate and discuss. I suppose this one's quite clear.
Yeah.
Choose a topic that you can all... I think with all of these things is, if you're going to have a meeting every Monday at 2 o'clock or whatever it might be, you have a plan, an agenda, and you have time to prepare. So if there's going to be a debate or a discussion, make sure everyone knows what the topic is, and then they can prepare. They'll have time to think about the vocabulary they want to use. They'll have time to think about the arguments they want to use. And then when you have the actual discussion or debate, it's much more fluent and confident.
And I think something really interesting about debate is because you're trying to, get an upper hand over the other person. So it's really motivating, and you tend to speak more than you would in, let's say, maybe a usual conversation. So this spirit to win it, I think that's really helpful.
Okay, great. I didn't mean to put them all at once, but anyway, here are a few more ideas. I think, so other things you can share recipes, share lesson ideas, talk about how we might deal with different teaching situations. And there are probably 1,000 more ideas you have for speaking in English with colleagues, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I hope you've been taking quick notes of these little ideas that you can use.
Yes. I've been taking lots of screenshots.
Yes.
Okay. In terms of, so we're basically wrapping up now. Maybe you can take a screenshot of this slide, and also the session is being recorded, so you can come back and listen and look at it again. So here is basically what we've been saying. Listen lots, listen widely, notice things, notice different aspects of pronunciation, notice vocabulary. Is it formal, neutral, informal? What is the situation? Think about how written English is different from spoken English. You can compare news broadcasts, news videos to news articles. So be aware of how spoken English is, and then practice. You can do it on your own, you can practice with a friend, and you can practice with a group of colleagues or friends. Okay, so this is what you need to do. You don't become fluent overnight. You need to work at it. And these are the main tips. So I want to leave you with one final thought before we go to the questions. I want you to now think, what are you going to do? It's all very, so you've listened to us for an hour. Hopefully you've enjoyed this session and you've got lots of ideas. And that's great. But we haven't made you suddenly fluent. What are you going to do that will improve your spoken English. Okay, so think about everything you've seen and heard us say today. And I want you to try and, I'm going to give you a bit of time now. Think of 3 or 4 ideas. And when I say things that you can do every week, okay, and think about things that you can do which are regular. And so, for example, in number 1 here, I said, a particular colleague. She and I will practice classroom instructions on WhatsApp on Tuesdays. Okay, Tuesday mornings, that's what we're going to do. And on Thursdays, we're going to have a conversation on photographs. Okay, 2 small and simple things. Second one here, another example, listen to the BBC 1 Minute News every day. And when are you going to do that? I'm going to do it when I first log in to my computer or my phone. When I first look at my phone, when I'm still in bed, whenever you look at your phone, when are you going to do this activity? So be clear. So think about a few things that you could do regularly that will help you become a better listener and speaker of English. Okay. All right, so I'll leave you to think about that. But right now, Danish, do you have any final thoughts?
I think it's also very important to keep a track of your progress. Sometimes we start to feel quite demotivated. We have been working on spoken English, for example, for a while, and we don't see any change. The thing about the changes, sometimes it's very subtle. It's not very easy to notice, especially for our own selves. So I think it's very important to be kind of mindful of the progress you're making and reward yourself. Give yourself a pat on the back. Sometimes you can cook yourself a special meal because you've done something well. And then share the recipe with your colleagues.
Yeah.
Find ways to connect things and stay motivated.
Yeah, I think that's where, and that's where recording yourself can come in handy. If you record yourself, at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, talking about the same thing, hopefully you'll see a lot of progress. Okay, so we're happy to hand over now and go back to questions. Let me see if I can stop presenting.
I think we have got a few questions here in the chat room already.
Okay. Okay. Shall we just start the questions?
Yes, ma'am. Now Mr. Sendil is compiling the questions. You would like to tell a few things before asking some questions?
The question answer. Sure, definitely.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Becky. Good morning, Danny.
Morning.
First of all, I thank the Department of School Education and Samagara Shiksha for providing this opportunity to everyone. I am Sendil, diet faculty, to all those who are participating in this session. First of all, Vicky and Danny, it was a stupendous presentation. We are all now living in a catch-22 situation, wherein which we have to reach to the learners as well as the teachers in any mode. And I think this mode of webinar is very comfortable and exciting for us to conduct. A webinar is like a movie. It's watching a movie. And some webinars are very fantastic and some are very interesting. I hope the teachers might have benefited with this webinar. They might have to overcome the inhibitions that they have. We have all been receiving questions, Becky and Danny. The first question which has been received is: does environment play a vital role in learning a foreign language?
Okay. Danish, what would you say? How important is environment?
I think it's quite important. Environment definitely plays a role in our learning a foreign language, especially. The thing with the mother languages, it's easier to learn because we have the environment. However, speaking from my own experience of growing up in a neighborhood where we did not have a lot of speakers of English, I think environment depends a lot on us. So it's not something absolutely external. So for example, in today's webinar, we were talking about ideas where you can create this environment with one of your colleagues. So it just takes you one person to create this environment. Something I would like to further stress is you can create the environment all by yourself, even you don't have a single friend. So what I used to do when I was growing up, struggling to learn English, I used to have conversation with myself. So I would, imagine a situation. Let's say I go to a restaurant and I need to order food. So what will I do? What will I say? And the waiter would say this, and I would say this. So that's what I think. Because I think this question really relates to the fact that a lot of us do not have the environment to speak English. I don't think that's
yeah, I think you're exactly right. That phrase "create the environment" is so important. We know that if you're surrounded by the language, you're going to learn more quickly, and we can do that. We have the technology to surround ourselves with the language. We have colleagues and friends who speak English, and we can do that together. And I think create that environment is perfectly possible. And speaking to
and
yourself
also
is
self-access to resources. I mean, the listening resources, especially the videos, etc. Where you can speak a lot of useful language and use it.
for sure.
We hope this answers the question.
Yes. Thank you. Where can we get the videos from British Council? Are they all open source? That
Yes.
they can be downloaded for free?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen again, and I want you see me. I want to show you 3 main sites. Okay.
It's again screen. It's here.
Oh, you can't see it?
Yeah, you can screen from your side.
Can you see my screen?
So we will stop screening. You can. Yeah, now we can start screening. Yes.
You can see, okay. All right. So I mentioned this site. This is Learn English Kids. On this site, you've got a lot of resources for songs and videos and so on for listening and watching, but also for reading and writing. So these are resources you can use with children. But when I'm learning another language, I also like to use resources made for children because they're fun and they're sometimes simpler. So you can use them for yourself as well. We have a site called Learn English Teens. So this is again for more teenagers. There's a special section on speaking here with videos for speaking. All of this is free. Anyone can access it. We've got Learn English, which is for adults. So this will be most useful for the teachers watching today. Lots of resources here. Again, different sections. You can practice your speaking skills here. We've got lots of videos where they show you a conversation and what's happening. What you can also do is, we've mentioned apps already. The British Council has lots of apps. This is the Learn English podcast app I was talking about. I highly recommend it. It's very good. We've also got grammar apps, more videos with the script as well. The sounds app, where you can check the pronunciation of different individual sounds, and grammar apps. So you can check out these apps. The last site, which would be really useful for your teachers, is this Teaching English site. So we've got lots of ideas, lesson plans, activities, professional development ideas available for free on this site. Okay, so you can look at what's happening and so on. There are webinars that you can check out. At the moment, there's a lot of information about online teaching as well. So those websites, if you just search for British Council Learn English Kids, Learn English Teens, Learn English, Teaching English, you'll find all of that there.
And I think the PDF that we're going to share at the end has all the links here.
Yeah. We'll share all the links with you.
Okay, thank you. We have an interesting question here. As we all know, British Council is one of the largest culture-based institution too, apart from English language. Do we have our own content towards culture? Because while you are playing a video, it is about blackcurrant.
Yeah.
Our kids might have not even seen the fruit blackcurrant. So do you produce and upload contents related to our geography?
So what I would say is most of the content there is made with an international audience in mind. A lot, you will find that there are some resources which will be more familiar to people perhaps in South America or in Europe or Africa, and some which will appeal to people in India. So it is created for a global audience. So you may need to check and choose your resources carefully. But I would also say that, you know, part of learning a language, particularly English, which is used internationally, is being able to talk about different contexts. It's about learning about the wider world. And when there are aspects which children might not be familiar with, that's a great opportunity to teach about the wider world. So it's a case of selecting the most appropriate resources for your context, and also balancing that with teaching about the wider world.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes, I completely agree with you, Vicky, because as we go globalized, we are living in a very small village, and the probability of interacting with the other countries and other nations is vital. That is the main thing about English as a global language. Danny, you want to say something?
what I wanted to add is sometimes we also need to realize what we see on a day-to-day basis. So for example, mangoes and our day-to-day vegetables that we see, they're not exciting to us anymore because they are everyday life for us. So sometimes it's really exciting to bring something new to the classroom. And the second thing I would like to say is when you see something that students might not be interested in, you can change it with your local context. So instead of blackcurrant, I can talk about sugarcane juice, for example. So there are two ways to look at it.
Okay, we have a question here, which is also very interesting. Do you have any difference in teaching English as a first language and teaching English as a second language?
So yeah, the main difference between learning a language as your first language is that you learn it at a much younger age. You're exposed to it from when you're first born. There are even studies saying that,
even before you're born, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. So French babies can recognize different patterns of sound and speech compared to German babies while they're still, in the womb. So it's very interesting. So it's about exposure. So children growing up with their first language are exposed to the language all day, every day. They are corrected in a friendly way, in a constructive way. Parents don't often focus on actual corrections; they focus on meaning. It's that kind of correction which is very helpful and supportive. It's a very supportive environment. So there are, but when we learn a language as older children or as adults, we often come at it from a different perspective. We have the cognitive abilities, we have the ability to think about the rules of grammar, and we can apply more tools and more strategies in some ways than children can. What we lack is the confidence and the confidence to make mistakes, basically. So there are definitely differences. What would you say, Danish?
I think, of course, the differences you have spoken about. But I think what's really important here is to remember to use the experience of learning a first language to learn a second language. So, for example, when you're talking about the experience of learning the first language being very constructive when it comes to feedback, I think a lot of it goes to the kind of encouragement that we get. So, as a parent, your child utters a word incorrectly. You are not bothered about the pronunciation. You're not bothered about the grammar, but you say, well done. That's really good. Look at him speak. You can do the same thing with yourself. Yeah. You use English, even if it's a little phrase, feel happy about it. Tell yourself, it's an achievement. I think it's really important to kind of build on both the experiences.
Yeah, be kind to yourself.
Rebecca, can we take some more questions? We have questions lined up. If you permit,
Okay.
we can take some more questions. Is it
Okay.
okay? Okay.
Rebecca ma'am, there is a question from Sridevi, PhD,
Primary school.
primary school teacher. Would you please refer some books for improving English speaking skills, improving skills on speaking?
Okay. I think, there are lots of books that can probably help you, but the reality is when it comes to speaking, the best teachers are those who are speaking to you. So if you can access the internet, which I presume everyone who is listening can do, then use that resource. You can't, I don't think you can learn speaking from a book. You have to learn speaking from listening and picking up what other people say and how they say it. So what I would say is, I don't think you need to necessarily buy a book. What you can do is access the free resources that the internet has. YouTube, TED Talks, the British Council websites, the local news stations that you have which broadcast in English, BBC News, CNN, Al Jazeera, all of these, they're all good sources of real English. That's the best way.
And I think there's a bit of a risk when you try to learn speaking by reading a book, is that you tend to become, first of all, unnatural, because bookish language is different from the way we speak. Secondly, I think a lot of our issues with the pronunciation come up because we learn them only by reading. So I think it's not a very useful idea to rely only on books. If you have some book that you're using, I might not say it's a bad idea, but supplement it with real English.
There is a question from Mrs. Surya Kumari, a lecturer. Please introduce a few tools for our students to. How will affective hypothesis influence classroom spoken English?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I didn't catch some of that.
Please introduce few tools for our students. How will affective hypothesis influence classroom spoken language?
Oh, okay. How will the effective hypothesis
Yes.
help with? Okay. Okay. So my screen went. Danish, do you want to start on this one?
I think when we were talking about the difference in learning your first and second language, I think all of these little tricks can really help you reduce the effective filters that we have in a second language classroom. So first of all, you need to create this friendly environment. You really need to give confidence. Here, we are actually shifting the focus slightly towards learners, which is fine because we are teachers. So we really need to remember to create this environment where students feel supported, welcome, and they feel encouraged and motivated to experiment with the language. They're not scared of making mistakes. So these little tips like appreciating, giving a lot of praise, when you have feedback, give it more constructively, and give them a lot of opportunities to first work with close, safe circles before you ask them to present it to the class. I think these are some ways to overcome effective filters. Becky, if you'd like
Yeah,
to.
I think it comes down to being positive and enthusiastic. If you have positivity and enthusiasm for what you're doing and for the language you're teaching, your students will have that too, and they won't be afraid to make the mistakes. They won't worry about, if they haven't said it 100% correctly. Remember, language, the purpose of language is to communicate. As long as you're getting your message across, that's the main thing, okay? Everything else is second. It's nice to be accurate and to be exact, but the most important thing is to get your message across, and you can get that message across by creating a positive, friendly atmosphere in the classroom. And like we said earlier, be kind to yourself.
And I think it's really important to be mindful of reminding yourself of these little elements that really affect the learning in a big way. Sometimes we think we listen to these kind of webinars, for example. We think, yeah, okay, I know this one. But when we go back to classroom or when we go back to our own language development, we tend to forget them. So be mindful. Keep reminding yourself repeatedly, I have to be kind to myself. Good luck to all of you.
We have a question here. Do we have a British Council center at Puducherry, or where to go in as to access any resource center nearby Puducherry for British Council?
I think the nearest centre is that in
nearest
Chennai.
center. Yes.
But at the same time, no one can really go to any of the British councils at the moment. So the best place to find resources is on the websites that I've shown you. Yeah, it's great if you can get to a British Council centre and use the library and borrow books. But when it comes to, hearing English and listening to English, you have all of the resources at your fingertips, just on your phone.
Is there any websites for self-assessment or self-assessment in English?
Yeah, there is. If you want to know what your level is in English, there is a free app called English Score. I'm going to share my screen again. I think you're going to encourage everyone to download this app so that you can. So this app is called English Score. Okay, and you can take a free English test and find out your level of English. The test is about 40 minutes. It's a free app. You can pay to get a certificate or whatever, but the test itself is free, and you can share your results. So that's a really good, and it's a really good test, and it will check your level of English. And then you can do that at the beginning of the year, and then a few months later, see if there's been any change. So I would encourage everyone with an Android phone to download that app and to take that test.
Rebecca, I would like to add here, since you have yesterday asked about the Google form, we have designed that Google form, and then the link of the app is also given, the link of the website, so they can add their scores also in the Google form, and we'll be collecting those information shortly. After this session is there, we will be circulating those Google forms.
Excellent. I think that's really important. And I think sometimes people get afraid about sharing their scores. Don't be afraid. This is just for everyone to understand the level of English that people have. And then we can tailor future webinars and sessions and courses to that language and help you make progress to the next level.
I don't think we have time for any more questions, do we?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have one more question.
A series of questions.
How will you think? In what way drama, theater, and creativity increases spoken English among students?
Okay, so I think that's a nice question to end with. So I think it's really important. Yeah, I think this is really important. It's a really good question, really important. You've got to make language learning fun. If it is studying from a book every day, doing gap fills, no one is going to learn anything. Okay, so and we're talking about teachers teaching primary and pre-primary classes, children are naturally creative. Use that creativity, that imagination, get them involved in projects. They are going to be so absorbed in the project to create a zoo or a flight to space that they won't really even realize that they're using English and learning English. Okay, so important to be creative in the classroom. And there are lots of ideas on the websites of how you can do that. Danish, any thoughts on that? I think there are lots of lesson plans and ideas on the websites.
Okay, Danny and Rebecca, I think it is an impressive session. You started with don't worry about mistakes. It is a key factor in learning any language.
Yes.
So it was an impressive start we had. I think Sendil would like to ask. Would you like to?
Yeah. I would like to add some of the toolkits that you were mentioning, Becky and Danny. I came across this BBC Radio. There is a episode called Archers, wherein which imaginative world, wherein which imaginative character they will be having habitual daily conversation. I think it would be very good for listeners to develop their spoken skills. And another one toolkit, a documentary is done by David Attenborough. Yeah,
Yes.
it is. Those are all the speakers wherein which we don't need subtitles to hear. In daily movies also, when we watch American, British movies, Australian, of course, even though we know English, sometimes it is very hard to comprehend the movie without subtitles. So I want to add this. And another question of mine: do you think, as a first language, Becky, you've been, I think you learned through English as a first language. Do you think there is a scope for learners, especially in India, Southeast Asian countries, to learn a second language unconsciously?
I think you can only learn a language unconsciously when it is your first language, I think. But, you know, Danish speaks English as his second or third. Danish speaks many languages, but he speaks English as fluently as, you know, at a very high proficient level like me. So there are lots of examples in the Indian context, you know, look around you, of people speaking English like native speakers. And I think it's a different process of learning. I can't learn Tamil to the same extent. Vanakkam is about as far as I can get, but it's not. You can't learn. It's a different process of learning. So I would say that's fine, and you have to apply conscious thought, and it's just a different process.
Oh.
Okay, I think we're going to have to end it shortly now.
Yeah. Now I request our Director of School Education to give the concluding remarks on this webinar. Hello, sir. I think Sir is online. Yes. I think we are not able to connect our Director of School Education. So before concluding this webinar, we can little bit explain about that scoring English app score, Rebecca, to our teachers. They'll be shortly how many minutes may be required to attend that self-assessment scoring.
Okay, so if they have an Android phone, they can download the app for free. It's called English Score. The app will ask to access their microphone and their camera, and that's a security measure so it can see if you're getting help, so it knows you're doing it on your own. The test is about 40 minutes, give or take, and it tests reading, reading, listening, grammar and vocabulary. It's very easy, just follow the instructions. So just go search for English Score on your on Google Play.
Yes, now I request our State Project Director to give the concluding remarks on this session.
Hi Rebecca. Hi Danish. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation, and I hope and I wish all the teachers will have their good learning experience. I think it's just a step ahead. I hope we have lot to collaborate and lot to interact, and I hope your interaction will be fruitful, and we make the Puducherry and as well as school education department a step ahead in improving our English, and we'll take all the necessary steps as you have suggested in your presentation also. We are here to take all the necessary steps to improve the standard of English among the students as well as teachers, and this is just a first step, and there are many steps to go. I hope you all enjoy working with us. Thank you for a wonderful presentation, and let us collaborate furthermore to make this Puducherry a good place for learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Before concluding the session, I would like to remind our heads of schools and teachers that we are having a session tomorrow, how to use the science corner in schools. Tomorrow's session, I request all heads of schools and teachers who are handling primary sections to witness a webinar tomorrow. And then we have a webinar on Friday. Again, we have with Rebecca and Danny will be joining us on Friday for the session on communicating in English for students. So that session will also be starting from 10 a.m. to 11:30. So we have 2 more webinars in this week. I request all the heads of schools and teachers to join us. Thank you once again to one and all for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Professional, but whether our
presentation was good, but